Okay, let's run.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it.
It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
Well, The Rock says, why don't we just cut right to the chase?
Okay, now he wants to get together. Well, he wants to talk.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
It's showtime, folks!
What are you?
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to And I Quote. This is a weekly show where we introduce some of the best creators from all over the world, and we find out more about them by taking your questions. I am your host, Ryan of And I Quote channel, and our guest on this episode is a legendary writer and the creator of Marvel's own Squirrel Girl. That's right, Squirrel Girl's creator is in the building. Please welcome Mr. Will Murray to the set. Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Ryan. Thank you for inviting me to this interesting live podcast.
Well, you're quite welcome, good sir, and thank you who may be watching or listening to us right now. Don't forget to like and share this with your closest friends. If you have any questions for our guest of honor, Will Murray, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat, and if you're joining us live or what is known as a replay, hello there. Welcome in, and thanks for being here. With that out of the way, Will, what would you say were some of your favorite books or favorite writers when you were growing up as a youngin'?
Growing up, I mean, the first thing I can remember reading that was a book was some vintage Nancy Drew novels that my third grade teacher had the class read. And I recently did a column from my Will Murray's 20th Century Panopticon column for Retrofan on my brief flirtation with Nancy Drew books. After that, I read Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time, and then it was several years before I began finding paperbacks that attracted me, such as Edgar Rice Burroughs' Gods of Mars and my first Doc Savage novel. And then I just tumbled into all that wonderful pulp stuff that was being reprinted in the late 60s, early 70s. And that was a crash course in H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, all those, great writers at that era. I don't know why I went in that direction, but it turned out to be, very important in my life, my creative life, as well as my personal life.
All right. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. And what was it that inspired you to start writing yourself?
That's hard to say, but I think when I was reading, and this would be in high school, when I was reading all these pulp writers, they ignited my imagination, and I started to express myself in short stories and even some poetry in the Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft vein. And I don't think I seriously thought about a career, but over time I began contributing to fanzines about Doc Savage and pulp heroes and pulp writers, and things sort of just gathered like a snowball rolling downhill.
All right. Cool stuff. Cool stuff. What would you say are some of the best or biggest rewards about being a writer? What do you think?
Well, being able to sleep late in the morning is one of my favorites. Not having to get up and punch a clock or report to someplace. Yeah, that's cool. I think it's the validation of people reading and reviewing your books and commenting and buying them, of course, and saying, how well you spun a yarn or turned out a story or did an interview or whatever. And I get a lot of consistent praise, to the point of which I'm a little tone deaf to it. I like to read it, but it's sometimes more interesting to read the criticism because there's relatively little of it.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. On the flip side of the coin, what are some of the biggest challenges about being a writer?
I think because of the intensity of focus in which I do certain things, especially writing novels, it's like a lot of things shut down when I get into writing a book, or even writing a piece of shorter writing that requires a lot of attention. You kind of live in the story until it's done. And a lot of things get ignored because you're in a mindset. It's a little like, doing your own income taxes. When you're doing income taxes, you get tunnel vision and you have to just be in that space to keep everything in your head. in writing a novel or something complex that's not necessarily novel length, it kind of excludes things. You do get this tunnel vision, and sometimes everything shuts down until you're either done or you're at a point in which you can say, okay, this is done except for polishing and editing. So I think it's I like to say, it's kind of like a trance state. You go into creative trance state and you can't do other things as well, or you don't have the motivation. That's a long answer, but I think you get my idea.
Yeah. No, I certainly do. I certainly do. And thanks for putting it out there and answering that for us for sure. If someone is watching or listening to this at the present time and they want to be a writer themselves, what advice would you give to aspiring writers out there?
Well, every generation of writers looks back and says, it was easier in the generation before me. When I started probably in the 70s, the pulp markets were long dead, and people used to, and other markets, there used to be a huge fiction market in this country in all genres, and it disappeared around the time I was born. And it gets harder and harder, and now you have to be agented unless you self-publish or have a connection. And to give advice is very hard, because I wouldn't tell anybody to do it the way I did, but because I came up through fanzines. But that's the way a lot of science fiction writers have started their careers, entering through fanzines and semi-professional zines. I would say the most important thing would be to learn the discipline of starting and finishing, which sounds very simplistic, but lots of people start and they don't finish, and a lot of people finish and they don't know what to do after that. I'm a production writer. I've produced a frightening amount of material. I certainly don't recommend that, because there are smarter ways to write in which you get more money for writing less books, but my heroes were the pulp writers. I believe in being prolific.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Fanzines. Haven't heard that word in a bit, but
Yep.
I am familiar with the term. I read a few here and there. I'm a bit younger than some of the fans out there. Sorry to date myself, but I'm learning as I go. And I've been to a few conventions where they have these magazines, retro fan magazines, all this great stuff. And it's always fascinating to look back and see how things were different or how things were presented a certain way and all that kind of stuff. So always great to learn your history, folks. It's always a good thing to do, and I encourage anyone to do so. I
guess the entry point these days is online, because you can blog and you can contribute and you can make a name for yourself, and on YouTube in a different way. But that, being on YouTube doesn't make you a novelist or a short story writer. And, a lot of my career was writing for Starlog and Fangoria and Comic Scene magazines, and all that stuff is online now. There aren't really print versions of those magazines anymore, because the immediacy of online makes articles on upcoming movies and news redundant, because it's always 30 days late, because you have to go to press and be distributed. So it's a different world than what I was growing up in.
Yes, most certainly. What were some of your favorite moments writing for Starlog and Fangoria? Was there any particular person you had a chance to sit down and talk with, or a movie set or a TV set that you may have visited that really stood out to you amongst the rest?
The first one was Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins, and at that time I had ghostwritten a Destroyer novel and a source book on the Destroyer, so that was my first, and that was great. I really enjoyed that experience. I didn't think it would lead to anything, but I ended up writing for Starlog for 30 years. Total Recall, the first one in Mexico City with Arnold Schwarzenegger, was a great experience. It had some of the best sets I've ever seen and the most diverse sets I've ever seen. Rambo 3, which is the deserts of Yuma, Arizona, was great, because we were out in the desert and there were helicopters flying around and tanks exploding. And I enjoyed that experience. I got a lot of assignments that began with Bring Your Boots, which means we were in a desert or a forest or a swamp, and there might be poisonous snakes and stuff. And I never was bothered by that stuff. Those are the ones that stand out. The person who, I've interviewed Stallone and Schwarzenegger and many other people who are, were very prominent in those days and are still famous now. But I think the person who stands out to me, oddly enough, was Dick Durock, who played Swamp Thing. I covered Return of Swamp Thing down in Savannah, Georgia. And we sat in his hotel room. He told me his life story about how he grew up, watching Tarzan movies and knew he'd be in movies someday, but didn't know how. And there was something about the guy that always impressed me because he was down to earth, and he seemed to be doing exactly what he wanted to do in life. And when I was writing the Destroyer series, I used him as the model for Remo's long lost father, and that's how much he impressed me. There were certainly lots of other places I went to. I went to Prague twice for Alien versus Predator and for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And I went to Vancouver many, many times. And for the two Fantastic Four movies, the first ones, I enjoyed those, although they didn't let us watch any filming, which was unusual. So I've had a lot of experience, and the travel was great. You'd go all over the place, but a lot of the times it was, Vancouver or Europe or the Deep South.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. There's a lot of us out there who are fans of the OG Total Recall with Schwarzenegger, Rachel Ticotin, Sharon Stone, Michael Ironside. See you at the party, Richter. I mean, my gosh, that is an iconic sci-fi film. And then the Rambo series, Rambo 3. Oh my gosh, that is awesome. Schwarzenegger and Sly, two of the biggest names in Hollywood. I mean, that's amazing. I'm glad you were able to experience that, because I love Total Recall is one of my favorite movies. The Rambo movies, obviously some of them are better than others, and obviously everyone always says that First Blood is always the cream of the crop, and I get that. But I didn't mind the sequels. As a matter of fact,
No.
I mean, here's a fun fact for those of you who are watching or listening to us right now. Rambo First Blood Part 2 turns 40 this year. So there is that. And in a few years' time, it'll be the 40th anniversary of what you just spoke of a moment ago, Will, the 40th anniversary of Rambo 3.
I also covered the Shadow movie, the ill-fated Shadow movie. I spent 2 weeks on that set, and that was a great experience. It's the only time I covered a film in L.A. And I was on the first Zorro movie with, what's his name? The Spanish actor.
Was it Antonio Banderas?
Antonio Banderas, yeah. Yeah, that was, I was lucky to be on several pulp movies. They never made a Doc Savage movie when I was covering films. That would have been one I would have been on. And, but, Zorro was great. It had great outdoor sets. That was south of Mexico City. And I thought the Shadow would turn out better than it did. And I think the problem, I say this, a lot to people who ask about that movie. I said, when I watched that being filmed, they sometimes shot scenes three ways: straight, comedic, and somewhere in the middle. And I think the mistake made in that film was when they cut it, they used the best scenes and not the scenes that lined up in terms of the overall tone of the movie. Because if you remember, the movie started out very moody. But in the climax, they're chasing that, atomic sphere around like it's the Keystone Cops. So, I think they blew it in the editing.
Yeah, there were behind the scenes issues, I'm sure. I mean, but I still enjoy it as a film, The Shadow with Alec Baldwin. I think it's a fun movie. It's a fun film. It does pay a tribute and homage to the original source material to an extent, not all the way, but to a certain extent, and it's fun. I like it. I have it on Blu-ray and DVD, to be perfectly honest. And we're wearing the shirt, ladies and gentlemen. I'm actually in the process. For those of you who are watching this, I have the Shadow T-shirt on today, and this is a graphic that's brought to you by our good friend Jeffrey Hayes at PlazaFireGraphics.com, where the look of your book matters to you, as his slogan goes. He does marketing and designs for authors and people who need marketing materials and that nature. So I love the Shadow. He's my favorite pulp character, and that actually is a brilliant way to go into this one. So, Master of Mystery, The Rise of the Shadow. What was it like putting this together for you?
It was difficult. I wanted to assemble a number of my articles in one volume, along with a revised version of the Duende History of the Shadow, my 1980 book on the subject. And I called it originally the Shadow Compendium. And Condé Nast objected to that title because it made it sound like it was an official release on the Shadow, which it wasn't. So we put the book on the shelf for a few years, and I rethought it, and I realized it's too big for one book. It's got to be two. So we broke it into two, and I built up this one, Master of Mystery, which was an assemblage of articles and interviews. And we followed it a year or so later with Dark Avenger, which I have a copy here, and you may have the image, which is the Duende History of the Shadow, expanded, revised, and differently illustrated with a Joe DeVito cover to match the first one. And I thought that would be the end of it, but people have been asking me to collect even more of my Shadow articles, of which I've written dozens and dozens. Now we're about to release Night of Darkness, The Legend of the Shadow, which gets more into the Shadow and other media. For instance, I interviewed the screenwriter on the Shadow film back in the day, and I expanded that interview. And there's also more Walter Gibson interviews, including one that's a tour of his career that I think is definitive. And it's got a wonderful Joe DeVito cover that I can't show you right now because I don't have a physical copy, but it's a Shadow in his sanctum, unmasked, speaking into the WNX microphone where he used to, in the stories, broadcast his radio show. So that'll come out probably this summer. And the best part, we got permission from Mike Kaluta to use a lot of his Shadow illustrations to illustrate it. So it will be very different in its presentation, because in the past, a lot of it was Frank Hamilton art, and now a lot of it is Mike Kaluta art. And he has a lot of previously unseen illustrations.
Ooh, that is, I can't wait to see it. I think I can speak for a vast majority of pulp fans and Shadow fans when I say this. We can't wait for that. So congratulations.
Thank you.
That is amazing. Once again, this is, and I quote, with the legendary writer and creator of Squirrel Girl himself, Will Murray is here with us. Don't forget to like and share with your friends. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. If you're joining this live or what is known as a replay, thank you so much for doing so. Oh my gosh, the Shadow. I mean, I've read pulp characters before, but the Shadow for me just stands out. He's such a standout. The way he conducts himself, the way he has his spies all over the city or all over the globe. You know, he has a secret society. You know, the ground is slippery, the ice is wet. One of his catchphrases, the weed of crime bears bitter fruit. I mean, there's so many great, catchphrases, and the way he looks with his costume, his outfit, it's so good. It's so good. I mean, of all the pulp characters, what is it that draws you to the Shadow so much?
Well, the Shadow was being revived on radio in the early 60s when I was growing up. I was probably 10 years old. So it was my first encounter with not only the Shadow, but old-time radio, which was, mesmerizing at that point because it didn't otherwise exist on in the modern sense of 1963 or 4. And Radio Comics, the Archie people, put out a Shadow comic that wasn't that good, but it fed into that. And I think he was just, since I was growing up in Marvel and DC Comics, he was often a different reality because he was sinister and mysterious and spooky. And he had a reality that the comics didn't have because comics are drawn. And I heard this guy on the radio, and then I picked up a few of the paperbacks in the later 60s, and I was reading them in print. So, it was exciting my imagination in a different way than comic books would. And he was mysterious, and you wanted, the way he was written, they never told you enough about him that you would say, okay, I understand the Shadow. They always led you on to more and more mystery of who he was, what he was, why he did what he did.
Definitely, for sure. Yeah, the mystery surrounding it. And when I look at it now, because I grew up with, the Batman movies and some of the other pieces of source material. So the Shadow does give off like Batman, Zorro vibes with the black outfit and the red mask and things of that nature. But then again, if it weren't for Zorro, there would be no Batman. So
yeah, if it was the Shadow, there'd be no Batman.
That's true. Yeah, there weren't for the Shadow, there's no Batman. So there's no Dark Knight for sure. But yeah, it's a fascinating character. One of the reasons I love wearing the shirt. One of the reasons I like going to conventions that sell some of the Shadow books or some of the older issues of the magazine, the Golden Age radio play on CD or MP3 files. It's really fascinating stuff for sure. And I actually have issue number 1 of the Shadow that was put together by, I believe it was Denny O'Neil and Kaluta did the cover. If I'm not mistaken. I have issue 1 as a graded comic. I bought it from my local comic book store, and that was the first graded comic I ever bought. And I believe it's at a 9.7 as far as what the grading is of the comic. And then at the store, I asked the gentleman there, the owner, I said, you wouldn't happen to have like some of the reprints or the issues of that particular run of the comic series, would you? And he says, actually, yeah, there's this box over here. It's got the comics featuring the Shadow, some of the other pulp characters. Feel free to look through it, purchase what you want. If you have any other questions, let us know. And I ended up buying the first 3 or 4 issues of that particular run of the comic. And I read it and I thought to myself, even for something that was written at this time of, in this particular era, this decade, whatever you want to call it, the artwork is great. The storyline moves very good, very quick, and you're just enthralled by it, you know? So my hats are off to the writers and the artists, because it takes a village. It takes an entire team to make a comic book work. So my hats are off to obviously Denny O'Neil and Kaluta and everyone around them that helped bring that to the forefront.
Yeah, I remember buying those comics and enjoying them, and they were, obviously very different than what DC or Marvel was doing at that time. And that was part of the great pulp revival when, Conan was coming up in Marvel Comics and becoming the success it was. It's unfortunate the Shadow didn't become more of a success, but obviously the fact that, both companies revisited the character and other companies as well, and Kaluta returned to the character, meant that it made a big impact. It just wasn't necessarily a commercial success at the time. It was a creative success. Definitely,
for sure. But yeah, one character becomes popular. The other. I do hope the Shadow does make a big return. I'd like to see the Shadow be rebooted, whether as a series of comics or an animated series on Netflix, or maybe as a movie at some point. Because I miss seeing this stuff. I miss seeing some of these characters that, from different eras would be brought back to the forefront, because, we're so used to the MCU, and now we're coming up on the new Superman movie coming out in July. And I wish them all the best of luck. But at the same time, well, if it weren't for characters like the Shadow and Doc Savage and all these other characters, you wouldn't have the Man of Steel Superman. No. Without Doc Savage, there's no Superman, right? Because, Doc Savage is the Man of Bronze. So, you can't, it's kind of saying like you can't have one without the other.
No, well, the rise of the Shadow followed by Doc Savage was exactly parallel the appearance of Superman followed by Batman. You had the hero who was, open and unmasked and a public figure, and then followed by the mysterious masked hero who was, operated by night. And they're exactly parallel in that sense, and only a few years apart, the later 30s versus the early 30s. So the templates were created not only for the types of heroes, but that dichotomy between the daylight hero and the nighttime hero.
Very true, very true. And speaking of the one known as Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze, before there was a Man of Steel. There you go. See, everything leads up to something. I never thought I would see this happen. Doc Savage crossing over with, wait a minute, the King of Skull Island, King Kong. Wait a minute, isn't King Kong like 1,000 feet taller than Doc Savage? How does the streams are crossing, folks? So Doc Savage, Skull Island. What was it like for you putting this together? How did this come about?
Well, my cover artist Joe DeVito, who does all my Doc Savage covers, a year before Doc Savage's 90th anniversary, I called him and said, we're going to have to do the 90th anniversary book next year, so we have to figure out what story. I had dent plots already in mind. It was a question of which one, because I needed a cover that celebrated the anniversary. And in discussing that, Joe reminded me of something that I hadn't forgotten, but just hadn't occurred to me, that he was connected to the Marion C. Cooper estate and owned certain King Kong rights. And, he could arrange for Doc Savage to meet King Kong. Now, it's going to sound crazy, but initially I was hesitant because I had a limited contract, and every every slot was filled by a Lester Dent plot, and I didn't want to do anything outside of that. But I thought about it and realized commercially I'd be an idiot not to do it. So I came up with a premise, and I wrote an opening prologue that Joe loved. So we approached Condé Nast, the owners of Doc Savage, and they were all for it. And we very quickly worked out a deal. And on the 90th anniversary of the premiere of King Kong and the release of Doc Savage, which was just within weeks of one another, we put out this book, and it's gotten tremendous reviews. So I'm very proud of it. It was meant to be mythic and larger than life, and it turned out to be exactly that.
Yeah, it looks incredible. I mean, I've heard of Godzilla versus King Kong because the movie came out not too long ago. The newest iteration of it, I should say, came out a few years ago in theaters. I saw it. It was okay, but I wanted Godzilla versus Kong to have more fighting instead of the human side of it, bickering between who's going to get control of who and who's going to win the fight and who's going to bet on who. I don't care about the human element of the story, really, because as we all know, buildings get destroyed, right? Countries get obliterated because it's King Kong and Godzilla. I mean, if you're in their way, you're more than likely going to be squashed like a bit of an ant on an anthill. But yeah, the movie didn't do quite, for me anyway, it didn't do quite as good. And then a couple years later, I know this is more recent, we got Godzilla and Kong, the New Empire. Me personally, I haven't seen the movie, but I heard it was, I don't know, I haven't heard too many things about it. I'm not really sure.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
Doc versus Kong isn't a slugfest, obviously. But it's both characters are challenged in different ways. And the basic thing that's going on in that story is Doc Savage just returns from World War I, and his father says, your grandfather's missing. He's in the Indian Ocean. He was a sea captain. We've got to find him. And they end up on Skull Island after following some clues. And they're on Skull Island, and so are a number of Borneo headhunters. And they're looking for the biggest head that anybody ever heard of, the head of King Kong. And so it's Doc and his father are trying to find their grandfather who's been stranded on Skull Island for a long time. And they're trying to contend with the dinosaurs and King Kong and the headhunters. And there's obviously more to the story, but that's the story.
Fascinating, as one might say, for sure. Well, it looks great. It looks fantastic. Doc Savage, King Kong. That is and that's a great cover, by the way. That is
a wonderful cover.
I mean, honestly, I would, if these were put together as posters, I would hang both the Shadow and the Doc Savage King Kong crossover one up on my wall if I had the wall space. It's great stuff. Great stuff. I mean, we've heard this before, right? Never judge a book by its cover, but we can't help it. We do it anyway. And Master of Mystery with the Shadow and Doc Savage crossing over with King Kong. Yeah, I'm looking at the book by the cover, and the covers look phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm very proud of my covers. I hire professional artists and I pay them. So we have, unlike the current trend in mass market books where covers are typed with maybe a little image somewhere, we do it, old style, which is the cover is the window into the book. And if we do it right, you're going to want to read that book. Very true. I think covers are worth the money you pay an artist.
Mm-hmm. Yep. In the words of our good friend Morgan Freeman, he's right, He's absolutely right. And you mentioned one of these characters earlier on, so let's dive into this a little bit here. First there's King Kong and Doc Savage. Now you got King Kong, wait a minute, versus Tarzan? Are you kidding? What? So what was it like putting this together, and what was your experience like writing for Tarzan overall?
It was a very different book because it was based on the 1933 story. The novelization was our template, which is a little different from the movie. And we'd gotten the rights for Tarzan the year before. And so this became an inevitable thing. And Joe DeVito, again, was instrumental in this because of the King Kong connection. And he suggested we put Tarzan on Skull Island. And I didn't want to do it. I'd already written about Skull Island. So I kind of pushed it off for a while. And then one day, inspiration struck, and I said, well, wait a minute. In the original King Kong story, they gas him on Skull Island, and next thing you know, he's on Broadway in chains. I said, obviously they got him back to New York be a boat or it'd be a freighter. So how did they do that? Where did they go? And I looked at a map and I said, well, the Suez Canal is a problem, because how do you get a giant ape in chains in the hold of your ship past customs? It's not going to happen. And if you go the other direction, you got to get through the Panama Canal. Same problem. And they said the only way to get from Skull Island in Indian Ocean to New York City is to go around the southern tip of Africa. And once you bring the boat to Africa, you bring King Kong in proximity to Tarzan of the Apes. So it was just a matter of arranging for Kong to escape the boat when it's, approaching the African coast to get provisions. And once King Kong is in Africa, he's way too big for the jungle and its animals. And this upsets Tarzan, who decides to pitch in and says, we got to get this thing out of my jungle. And it's a King Kong story first. Tarzan doesn't come in until fairly late in the book. And I treat him the way King Kong was treated in the original movie, which is a mythical character that no one is sure exists until he shows up and, oh, he's real. And this was a cinematic style book because I wanted the characters to talk and act like they did in 1933. So it's not so much an action pulp novel as a cinematic adventure novel. And I got a lot of praise for the characters of Robert Armstrong's character and the others acting and talking like they did on the screen. So it was a fun project. It came together fairly easily, and and I found out many years later that Marion C. Cooper, who created King Kong, wanted to have those two characters meet, but he couldn't get the rights, and I had no idea. So although it was my idea and I thought it was original, it was actually a very old idea. Actually, Dark Horse started to do a graphic novel based on this idea, but they had started it and didn't explore the rights, figuring, well, we can get the rights, let's just get going. And once they got the rights, they found they were too tangled to untangle, and they gave up. So that was the end of that. So I was lucky to be able to do a book that people had dreamed of and thought impossible for literally generations.
My goodness. Well, congratulations on all of that. I mean, yeah, these covers look great. The storylines sound wonderful. Fantastic stuff. There is no doubt about it. There's been a lot of these too over the years. There's been a lot of book to movie adaptations. We talked about Alec Baldwin's The Shadow earlier on in this show. We've mentioned all these different characters. What are some of your favorite book to movie adaptations? Although they may not have been 100% accurate, because as we all know, in Hollywood, they take creative liberties with properties. But what have been some of your favorite book to movie adaptations, whether it's the pulp characters being at the center of it, or maybe some of the Marvel or DC characters?
Well, it's much criticized, but I thought the John Carter movie from Disney was very well done. I didn't see a lot to criticize. I mean, yeah, you can't always be faithful to the book, but it wasn't so unfaithful. It was unrecognizable. I liked most of the Superman movies. I'm looking forward to the new one. And I'm open to different interpretations of Superman. Of the Marvel movies, the first Avengers was really good. I liked the two Fantastic Fours, but they weren't quite as strong as they could have been. But I did like them. And the first Zorro was good. The one I covered with Antonio Banderas, I thought that was very well done. The second one, not so much. I haven't watched a lot of the Lovecraft movies, and I'm a big Lovecraft fan because I think Lovecraft works better in print than any other form, but that's me speaking as a writer. I think that's probably it. Something will come to me later, but right now, off the top of my head, those are the ones that I most enjoyed.
Yeah, no, it's a great list too, because we actually did a show a week or so ago talking about our top 5 favorite, I would say, Marvel Cinematic Universe films, and the Avengers of 2012 did come up a number of times.
Yeah,
during that discussion, and it's in my top 5. I mean, that's a movie I can go back to and rewatch, anytime, and still get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And obviously the interactions between Steve Rogers and Bruce Banner, I think, are really good. The interactions between Tony Stark and Bruce Banner are really good because they're both scientists in their own special way. You know, Banner goes about it one way, Tony Stark goes about it another. So the hemming and hawing between the characters and the interactions are really well done in that first movie. For sure. If you're a fan of Marvel at all, you'll understand what I'm saying with 2012's version of the Avengers. So check it out if you haven't. And if you haven't seen it in a while, go back and revisit it. You may get something out of it. I don't know. It's a perfectly good film to watch whenever you need to, and it's good to watch with family, friends, whatever you want to, however you want to go about it. Loki was a good villain too. So
yeah, he was.
Nothing wrong with Tom Hiddleston chewing up the scenery. I don't think there is. Once again, this is And I Quote with Will Murray. Don't forget to like and share. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments. If you're joining us live on the replay, hello there. Thanks for being here, for sure. So speaking of Marvel, you're wearing the shirt. The character's been around for a number of years. I'm just curious, how did Squirrel Girl come about? What went into the creation of this character? And did Marvel come to you and say, we're looking for something like a Squirrel Girl? Or did you just come up with it on your own out of the clear blue sky? How did it happen?
Well, I was writing the Destroyer Black and White series for Marvel, the short-lived Destroyer Black and White series based on the Remo Williams novels that I was ghostwriting at the time. So that got me into Marvel. And after I'd been doing it a number of months, they asked me to do a fill-in issue of Iron Man to see how I could handle a Marvel character. And I'd had the idea of Squirrel Girl knocking around in my mind. In fact, I'd mentioned her in a couple of Destroyer novels as a joke, which surprised me when I learned about it years and years later, because I'd forgotten the characters pre-existed that Iron Man story that I did with Steve Ditko, but she had. And the inspiration was I had a girlfriend whose first name was Doreen back in the 80s, who was a comics fan. And she was into animal rescues and, worked for, animal rescue companies and stuff. She now works in a comics store, believe it or not. And one day we were going to church. It was winter, and she's wearing a winter jacket. In the middle of the service, she zips down the front of her jacket, and a little baby squirrel head pokes its head out. I had no idea it was there. And that led to either me or a friend joking about Squirrel Girl, that Doreen was Squirrel Girl. And somehow that idea evolved, but I never did anything with it until I was asked to do the Iron Man story. It's the best of my recollection. My first thought was I wanted to have Iron Man fight Dr. Doom. Not only was he one of the best Marvel villains, but during the time I was reading Marvel comics in the 60s, they never did that. And I thought, except in in Avengers, but Iron Man wasn't in that issue of the Avengers. And I thought that was a natural pairing, two armored heroes and villains. And so I think I started with Dr. Doom versus Iron Man, and Squirrel Girl came in as sort of the catalyst, because I wanted to introduce a new character to the Marvel Universe. And yeah, it was a bit of a lark, a bit of a joke on one level. But and the original artist was going to be Tom Morgan, who was a big Iron Man fan and wanted to do an issue of Iron Man. And the day he came in to pick up the script, Steve Ditko walked into the editor's office, and there had been an edict that came down from Tom DeFalco that week or recently at that time, that Steve was looking for work. If you got anything, give it to him. And my editor handed Tom's script to Ditko, and that's how Steve Ditko ended up drawing the thing. And I'd been working with Steve in the Destroyer. He was doing some of the backup stories. So I loved that idea. I was sorry Tom didn't do it, because Tom was a good artist and was excited about it. But, I'd already had a pre-existing working relationship with Steve. And I thought he did a great job, an amazing job. And I lobbied for him to ink his own story, and they let him do that. And I thought he did a good job on that. And I think when the story was printed, I was much more impressed with it than I expected to be, in the sense that the character of Squirrel Girl really sort of came across well. She was like alive, and she was distinct, and she was unique. And I pitched a miniseries. They didn't go for, not a miniseries, a one shot where she tries to join the Fantastic Four. And that didn't go over, and for like 12 years we never heard from Squirrel Girl because an editor at Marvel made a public announcement. Yeah, we love that character, but she's not really a Marvel character. Well, time passed and they brought her back and she clicked. And, you know, I was not surprised that she clicked. I was surprised it took so long because I sensed she had tremendous potential when I created her. And I was just astonished that they didn't do anything with her for so long.
Yep. I mean, I'm glad that everything came full circle, made her way into Marvel, made a really good impact, and a lot of people at conventions have cosplayed that I've seen as Squirrel Girl. So it's taken on a bit of a life of its own. There's one cosplayer I know of, Allie B cosplay, who lives in the state of Texas. She cosplays as Squirrel Girl. I believe Samurai Jill, who's also on Instagram as a cosplayer, she's cosplayed as Squirrel Girl during the course of her career. So yeah, Squirrel Girl has had an impact, man.
Hundreds, if not thousands, of Squirrel Girl cosplayers have popped up on YouTube and X or whatever they're calling it now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's well, you know, she's a very relatable character for younger women or even older women, I suppose, because, you know, she's upbeat, she's positive, she's not flaunting herself. You know, she's meant, you know, I created her in the context of she would be like a Silver Age character, innocent and extremely positive, you know. And at the time she appeared in the early 90s, Marvel was full of dark and grim and gritty stuff and sexualized characters. And I guess it still is to some degree or to a similar degree. And I wanted her to be retro in the sense that, you know, this is a fun escapist character. And I succeeded, thanks to some good artists who, you know, have also brought the character to life in a way that, you know, is true to my vision.
Absolutely so. Yeah, I was just looking at some of the history here, some of the early appearances that she has. This is an image that we did find. So you got her interacting with Iron Man, and Iron Man says, "Well, your name's Squirrel Girl. It does rhyme." So,
well, the way I pronounce it, Squirrel Girl does rhyme.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just funny to me that Tony Stark would say that because that is a Starkism thing to do, you know, to a certain extent. And then you got the old school Iron Man suit going on here. So yeah, she, you know, from her earliest appearances to where she is now. I mean, yeah, she's had a big impact. She's come a long way, and you know, she continues to evolve like every character in Marvel or DC or any comic really history. So congratulations on Squirrel Girl, man, because every time I go to a Comic-Con, there's always that one woman or one or two or three even cosplayers who are dressed up as this character.
Yeah, I've met many Squirrel Girl cosplayers, and it's always fun. And it's amazing to me, it continues to be amazing to me that that girls and women are into comics in a way that wasn't true when I was growing up. Girls and women, when I was growing up, they'd read Archie or Casper or something, and then, you know, stop reading comics. And now, you know, there's a big female audience that, you know, has evolved over time. I don't know if you can see this. This is a picture of the original model for Squirrel Girl. Let me see if I can put this up here.
Oh, yes, yes.
And, you know, she even looks a little like the Ditko version, although Ditko didn't know about her. And this is from the 80s. I have better pictures, but this one just happens to be near my computer. And I still know her. She clerks at my local comic shop.
Oh, well, that's cool. That's cool. Local comic shop. Where is this? If you don't mind us asking, where in the world?
Quincy, Massachusetts, New England Comics on Hancock Street. She's there a lot of days, and she's been there for, I think, 20, maybe 30 years now.
Wow. Oh, well, congratulations on that, folks, and always support your local comic shops when you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So definitely keep up the support, ladies and gentlemen. Small businesses, local businesses are what keep us going. So definitely give our local comic shops a shout out there, whether it's Collector's Corner in Parkville on Harford Road here in the state of Maryland, where we are at Anti-Quote Studio, or near where we are in Anti-Quote. I'm in Maryland personally, so yeah, there's our fair share of local comic book shops. Not only that, we have Baltimore Comic Con that's held every year, which is a big show. And speaking of which, what has your experience been like at Comic-Cons, is there any specific moments that stand out to you the most when you're there tabling and selling your books and your comics and you're meeting with the fans and things like that?
Well, I go to the local shows that I go to. Nationally, I go to pulp shows, pulp and paperback shows. But locally, the comic shops I go to, I have a big Squirrel Girl banner, but I don't have a lot of Squirrel Girl merchandise because I've only written 3 Squirrel Girl stories. So I'm selling my books, so there's a little bit of a disconnect. But I do get a lot of attention because of Squirrel Girl. But if I had more product, I would sell more. More Squirrel Girl product, I would sell more. I mean, I like the cosplayers. I'd like to talk to them, and I'd like to hear people's opinions of the characters, how much they, people have said to me, if not at conventions online, Squirrel Girl saved my life. And I think, a lot of characters, a lot of people at difficult times in their life discover writers or TV shows or characters that, inspire them and give them meaning and give their life meaning. And I'm pleased to say that some people have said that Squirrel Girl, saved them at a particular time. It was an escape or it was an inspiration or whatever the reality was. She, and she's meant to be, I think the best characters are inspirational, superhero characters. Superman was inspirational. Batman, maybe not so much, but and Fantastic Four was inspirational because they open young minds to, possibilities. And, but they also set examples for, being positive people living a positive life. Dark Savage is inspirational. The Shadow, not so much.
Yeah, bit of a contrast there, right? Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, no, I get the inspiration part. Yeah, I one of the reasons I love Superman so much is because he's inspirational in a lot of ways. I went through a difficult period of my life, and I was watching the TV series Smallville on the CW / formerly known as the WB network, just so everybody is clear, and it helped me through a dark time. So I got to give Smallville and the TV series, the writers, the producers, the actors, of course, give it up for Tom Welling, Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor, Kristen Crook as Lana, Erica Durance as Lois Lane. Hello, Lois. Just great show, got me through a hard time, and now Superman's my favorite character because it got me through a dark time. So I've been I was a Superman fan as a kid, but I really wasn't like an uber Superman fan, if that makes any sense, until Smallville came into the picture. And then what am I trying to say here? It just snowballed for me on a personal level. But that's just me. I mean, listen, I've heard people tell me before, my favorite character is, like Iron Man because he got me through this. Or, my favorite character is so-and-so because they got me through this period of my life. Or I like the Shadow because of this. I like Doc Savage because of that. It's like, I love hearing those stories. We all do, because there's always going to be that character, whatever character it is, from whatever distributor, whether it's Marvel, DC, Vertigo, Boom Comics, Image Comics, any of them that tell me, if it weren't for this character, I would not be the person I am today. If it weren't for this writer on this particular run of the comic, it would not have inspired me to become the writer that I am today.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Got to give the creators, the people who work tirelessly behind the scenes to bring these comics or these movies or these television series to life. I mean, Alfred Gough and Miles Miller created Smallville. So thank you to those two gentlemen, because it wouldn't have happened without them creating it in the first place. So, and obviously we got to give Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster the props, because Superman would not have existed without those two. So well done, fellas. Well done. Is there anyone you hope to meet at a convention somewhere down the line that you haven't met yet, whether it's a writer or someone from the comic book world that you've yet to have a sit down conversation with?
Sadly, no. And the reason is that all the people I grew up with, comic wise, I've either met or they've passed away. I used to be in touch with Steve Ditko a lot. I'd visit his studio and I talked to him on the phone, and he's now gone. And I sort of lost touch with him after a while. But there isn't anybody left. It's kind of sad, because I started going to comic conventions in the mid 70s, early 70s, probably mid 70s, and conventions at that time were just full of talent that went back to the golden age, and over time they've passed away. And so the people who I would most, and I interviewed many of them. I interviewed Bob Kane extensively on 2 occasions. Never interviewed Siegel and Shuster, but I've talked to Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. I've interviewed several times. Don Heck, I've interviewed Dick Ayers, I've had interviewed, people like that, people whose, work meant something to me growing up. And, but, I don't read comics anymore except randomly. And so I'm kind of shocked that the talent that was coming in after I stopped reading regularly, like Frank Miller and people like that, are old, getting older, just as I am, obviously. And some of them are already people who I thought of as the young talent have passed away. It's like, that's getting really weird, But then again, I bought my first comic book on the Christmas Vacation in 1961. That's like a million years ago now.
Do you remember specifically what comic it was?
Well, I bought more than one, I think. I bought a Superman and a Strange Adventures. And the Superman had the flame dragon from Krypton on it. Really? And in that same time period, I bought my first Marvels, but they were like Journey into Mystery and Tales to Astonish. But I was around for Fantastic Four #4, which was the Submariner return, and for Hulk 1. And so I was almost on the ground floor of the Marvel revival.
Oh, goodness gracious. The ground floor? Oh, my gosh. It's a lot of history, folks. It's a lot of history, for sure. Well, are there any projects that you have coming out in the near future, or stuff you're currently working on now, or things you're doing nowadays to continue on with your legendary writing and with Squirrel Girl, or anything else?
Well, I mentioned Night of Darkness, which is, more media and comics oriented than my previous Shadow compilations. I've got a really unusual novel coming up, Secret Agent X versus Dr. Death. Secret Agent X is a pulp character from the 1930s. It was a little bit like a cross between the Shadow and Doc Savage and a few others. Dr. Death is a short-lived mad scientist type who dabbled in the supernatural, so he controls zombies and elementals and weird things. And I got the idea a couple of years ago of a crossover in which Secret Agent X tackles his first supernatural menace in Dr. Death and his minions. And that book is written, it's being edited, the covers come in, it's really spooky, it's wonderful, and I'm excited about it because Secret Agent X, halfway through the book, realizes he's in over his head. His basic tools are disguise, gas gun, and gadgets like Doc Savage. And he realizes he needs a team, so he starts to assemble a team of other pulp heroes to help deal with this supernatural menace. And so this is probably the most over-the-top novel I've ever written, and that's saying something. I got another Tarzan plot I want to do, one that's a little different. We'll put him in Madagascar, a place he's never been, and make it a little more fantastic than some of the Tarzans. I've got a biography of Lester Dent, the creator of Doc Savage, I'd like to finish, but I have to finish what I'm doing. And I do a bi-monthly column for Retrofan, as I mentioned, the Will Murray's 20th Century Panopticon. I just turned in 2 columns, Burke's Law, a TV show, and a retrospective on the Executioner paperback series, which was very interesting to write because Don Pendleton, the creator, gave a lot of interesting quotes, and I mined those for the article. And I guess I'm going to do the Green Hornet TV show next for that column, followed by probably The Rifleman is next, one of my favorite Westerns of the early 60s.
Well, that is fantastic. Yeah. And a lot of these announcements that you're making are going to be music to Bob Greenberger, Bobby Nash, Dr. Richard A. Olson's ears.
Sure.
That is for sure. Bobby Nash, indie writer Bobby Nash in the great state of Georgia. He just came out with a Secret Agent X novella recently.
Yeah, I felt bad about that because he revived the character when I was doing mine, and my book is on a much more grandiose scale than his, but he's not the only one doing Secret Agent X. I have another friend who lives in Louisiana who has been doing Secret Agent X novels because he's public domain. He's fair game for any writer who wants to tackle him. And I like the character, and I like the fact that the series has a horror atmosphere. But until I came up with the Dr. Death idea, I thought, well, other people are doing Secret Agent X, and I like to do something that stands out and is unique. And when I came up with the Dr. Death crossover, I realized this is it. this gives me excuse to write a Dr. Death story that's worth writing, you know, on the level of it being a crossover and an event.
Fantastic stuff. Well, congratulations on all the things you have upcoming. Look forward to sitting down and reading them. And I'm sure the person who's watching or listening to this right now is looking forward to doing the exact same thing. And I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Will Murray for being our guest on this week's episode of And I Quote. Thank you so much for being here, Will. It was great to see you. It was great to talk with you and get to know you a little better. And obviously going back into your history of writing for characters such as Doc Savage, The Shadow, and the stuff you have moving forward. Cannot wait. Cannot wait to sit down, digest it, read it all, share with all our friends on social media and all that jazz. And speaking of which, if someone wants to know more about you or purchase copies of your books or some of your, check out some of your columns and things of that nature, where can they follow you?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I still call it Twitter because I think they'll probably change the name back. My website is www.adventuresinbronze.com. Adventures in Bronze is one word. And that's where you can buy my books in softcover and hardcover and sometimes ebooks. But I'm also on Amazon in softcover and ebooks. So you can go on Amazon and get my stuff there. And that's pretty much it. You know, on Facebook, I'm William Patrick Murray, my full name. And on Twitter, I'm Will Murray 334, if I'm not mistaken. And I like interacting with my readers. I love reviews on Amazon. People fortunately review me a lot, and they give me really good reviews. If you're interested in my books, you should go on Amazon and read the reviews because they help sell the book, obviously, because I've been fortunate in the sense that because I write so many different characters and I can mimic the styles of the original writers, I've managed to play in the sandboxes almost all of my favorite pulp writers and characters. The only one I haven't done is a Robert E. Howard story, and maybe someday, who knows.
Anxious to hear and read about that one, Robert E. Howard. I mean, we got Conan the Cimmerian over here, so there you go. Give credit where credit is due, folks. Well, Will, thank you so much for being here once again. It was an honor and a pleasure to have you here and have a great discussion with you. And for the listener or the viewer, we hope you enjoyed this as well. Will, stick around. I'm going to talk to you here again momentarily. So just give us a moment here. My name is Ryan of And I Quote Channel. Follow me across all forms of social media simply at, I should say, And I Quote Channel. Where am I pointing to? There it is. Right here on our name tag, the links to where you can follow myself and Will Murray are in the show notes in the description down below of this video and this episode of And I Quote. So check those out. Check out the copies of his books. Check out all the wonderful things that Will Murray has done or he is about to do. He's got so many wonderful things coming your way very soon. And we thank him for taking time out of his schedule to be with us and be a part of this episode. What an honor. What an honor and a pleasure. Look forward to having Will Murray here back again at some point in the future. And we are also on the road to 5,000 subscribers. Once we do, we'll have a great big live stream that will include special giveaways that you, the viewer or listener, are going to be eligible to win. We also have merch. We have hoodies. We have T-shirts. We have stickers that you can add to your water bottles. We have coffee mugs, stationery, a couple throw pillows, you know, all kinds of wonderful things or merchandising, as Mel Brooks would say, considering the fact that he just announced that Spaceballs 2 apparently is happening almost 40 years later. I'm shocked. But then again, in Hollywood these days, I guess nothing really surprises me. But yes. So, And I Quote is on, normally it's on Saturdays, 12 p.m. EST, and then movie watch-alongs where we celebrate movies that are turned a certain age or on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Fridays of each month at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The next episode of the Writers Showcase, where we have a roundtable of different writers of different genres, share with us their experiences with writing, what they encourage people to do when it comes to being aspiring writers and things of that nature. Next episode is going to drop on Saturday, the 21st of June at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So tune in for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have a great roundtable of writers that are going to be joining us for that. And we look forward to bringing you more episodes of that and all the other wonderful things we got coming in the future. So don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when videos go up or they go live. Remember, life is better when supporting creators from all over the world. Take a look.
Choose high-flying action. Choose death-defying escapes. Choose spine-tingling thrills. Choose nail-biting intrigue. Now's your chance to choose the adventure. The Captain Hawkland Adventures. Available on Amazon.com.
A mission for the police. A mysterious passenger. Mitch Mayhew is carrying more than the mail this flight. Unwanted Passengers, a roaring, prop-spinning, pulse-pounding historical thriller for fans of aerial stunts, flapper-era intrigue, and reluctant heroes with debts to pay and demons to outrun. Order your copy of Unwanted Passenger today.
You've worked hard and written a great book. Now, it's time to give it a great cover. If you're an indie author or small press publisher, Plasmafire Graphics is your source for affordable cover illustration and graphic design. Plasmafire Graphics, when the look of your book matters to you.
Good morning! Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.